Right on. So, shall we get started?
Sure, let's do it.
Right on. Well, this is Mark, good friend of mine for many reasons. I can just start right off the bat by saying I met you in AA, and
Friend of Bob.
yes, I saw you come through the door looking like you needed some help. And the first time yeah, that's right. First time I kind of was like too embarrassed or I don't want to help or whatever. So I went through that maybe a first or second time with you, but then that one day we were all together and I got to share the solution with you. And that's been great, man. That's some of the reason I have you here today, because you took it and you ran with it and now it's all your own. And I think it's a miracle and a beautiful thing. So that's where we'll start this, and then wherever it goes from there, it's fine.
It's fitting too, because here in 3-4 days is year number 4.
Yeah, coincidentally.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, coincident, right? But I mean, it's you start thinking about that kind of stuff. You start thinking about how you got from point A to point B, and sometimes you don't always have an answer. You like to maybe have some sort of profound thing for like the new guy coming in the door at the meeting and whatnot. But, I mean, I learned from watching some Buddhist monks that would do like Dharma talks as they'd call them. And I remember one of the things that they would always say is that you really shouldn't have anything planned to talk about when you're sharing, anything with anybody.
Even this today.
Yeah. I mean, if you have too much, if you have an agenda, you have something lined out, whatever, that's nice, but you have to kind of go with the moment sometimes too.
Yeah, that doesn't quite work for me anyway.
I'll be listening to people, at an AA meeting or anything that I'm gathered with people, and maybe it's my turn to talk or something like that, and I've been listening the whole time thinking, oh yeah, that's cool. Oh yeah, this idea is fun too. But by the time my mouth starts opening, it's like, it's whatever it is.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
I've heard that you let God speak through you. And so I've prayed before I've had meetings that I would say something worthwhile, and then I just speak.
Yeah.
And then, what comes out, comes out. And the day that we had our little sit down, like, it must have been working right, because you got the message, and it's no credit to me other than I just delivered it to you. But I didn't plan to do that day, but we were put together and I was given the message spiritually that I should help you. So I did. And it was beautiful.
Well, thank you for that. It's interesting too, looking back. I mean, one thing that I reflect on is that it was a long time coming. It was something that I knew needed to happen. In fact, I had been reading and listening to Russell Brand's Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions, several times, like while I was actively still drinking and being stupid with myself, because part of me knew, it's like, well, this is something you better be putting in your toolkit right now, cool. Because you're going to need this stuff. And I do see some of those people that come in and out of the rooms and stuff like that. And I feel for them because, sometimes it takes a while to get those tools. It really does.
It took me years.
I mean, it took me years too. I just happened to just show up at AA the time that I was actually ready to start going down the program. Yeah. I definitely could have and should have been in the rooms many other times.
Yeah. Now, you and me have quite a few similarities in our story and how that worked out for us. It seems like all the people that kind of come in younger, they kind of do go back out. Not all of them, but it seems like some have to go get some more experience, especially if you're the nature of mentality that we are, or that I am. I got to get beat on plenty.
And being honest with yourself too. I mean, you could be a young person as long as you're brutally honest with yourself. I think I remember thinking at a young age when I was first joining a frat in college, this will be a good idea. I'll live at my bar. Let's see how that works out.
Yeah.
And my mom's telling me, hey, alcoholism runs in the family. You might want to be careful with that. I'm like, I'll be fine, Mom.
That was kind of a thing of pride or rite of passage in my mind.
Sure.
was to become that same alcoholic I seen some of my family members.
There you go.
Thought it was destiny.
It's another way of looking at it.
Yeah. I'm thankful for where it brought me, though. It's like, yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't have been an alcoholic, if I would have got this message, is how I feel about it now.
I've thought that before, where you literally have to make the mistake to learn from it. It's nice if you can learn from other people's mistakes, but it's almost like you might not own it as much.
Yeah. That's the definition of a master. It's the one that's made every mistake. Yeah.
That's one way of looking at it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so here we are, and then it's been a pleasure to see you blossom through the years. You got your 4-year coming up here, and also proud of how you've felt your kind of misery in the working world and kind of stepped out and done your own thing, man. That's really awesome.
Ridiculous. I wouldn't, that's to me that line, that kind of through line of how everything kind of comes together in someone's life, in reflection, and you start looking at that kind of stuff and you're like, where did I, and that's the sort of stuff to me that speaks to a higher power more powerfully than anything else, is the fact that even if I had tried to put down a really nice, well thought out plan of how to progress career wise from one spot to the other, it doesn't go that way. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Things appear, or things are manifested with or without your control typically. And so career wise, it's Action Act. I'm coming up on a year right now from actually year plus, having struck out on my own to start my own consulting firm, gave it a name and all that good stuff, right? And
go ahead and share that name with us.
It's Arkenstone Exploration, which has its own fun story.
Yeah,
Tolkien nerd stuff.
You got all the time to tell it today. All the stuff you feel like talking about.
Sure,
all the details.
And but I could have sat there and as we say in the room sometimes, jumped up and down in my bucket of shit and said, this project didn't work out, this job didn't work out, that mine shut down, or whatever. And I could have been blaming the universe this whole time, and then I would have missed out on the opportunity to go do my own thing. And so grateful that I was already in the program, because you learn not only to not drink, but you also learn how to listen to yourself and the universe and everything else that's actually around you these days. And that rigorous honesty is a window into your own soul most of the time. It's like, well, that's why you're here. That's why that's happening, and sometimes you get that grace of being able to look back and go like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
That stuff lined up.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're just kind of floating because you don't always know what's going on.
Yeah. That's the sixth sense.
Yeah.
That it talks about.
Little
the spiritual
whisper.
Sense.
The whisper and I think the Bible somewhere speaks of it as a kind of a breeze, not a gust or something. I think I'm paraphrasing, but the idea of it being kind of a small wind that you have to be listening to.
Still small voice is another way I've heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be ignored. That's the tough part.
You have to be paying attention if you want to listen and hear that. And a lot of people, too busy. The other thing that comes up every once in a while too, that's kind of a merge of, I studied Buddhism for many years, and kind of the AA program these days too, and I think I've shared it before, is something called the third moment. The idea that that's the first point in anybody's life where we actually have any amount of control, call it control. First moment being the thing happening out in reality. Second moment is your flesh and bone mind picking up on that thing. The third moment is when your brain, your thinking, feeling, sentient being brain, can actually do anything about it. Most people don't realize that there's all three of those different moments. They're split seconds, right? And they just assume that the external stimuli is happening to them and their reaction is simultaneous, and their reaction to the stimuli is just one-to-one. But the reality is, I think I heard it in the last meeting I was at, you don't have to show up to every fight you're invited to. It made me think about it. And this third moment idea has come up in my brain several different times. while sitting in the rooms, and it's such a cool thing to continue to connect with. I'm like, oh yeah, that means that too, and that means that too. The idea that, I don't have to show up to every fight that I'm invited to, meaning when that third moment finally comes to my brain and I can actually interact with the external stimuli in a thoughtful way, I can decide what to do with it at that point.
Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about that, like being stuck in traffic or something, or in a hurry and somebody in front of you is not going fast enough, or it comes into play. You can either flip them off or get mad, or you can calm down and
it's your choice.
Yeah,
laugh or cry, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of the other one, the "Don't push the river."
I like that phrase.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, the river to me is the universe itself. It's the flow, right? Go with the flow, dude. But it's so true. If everything's going that direction, and that go with the don't push the river also is, if you're the only asshole in the room, right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing. If you're in a room full of assholes, guess what?
Yeah. Probably not them.
You're probably the one that's the asshole.
I have that thought quite a bit lately. There must be something going on.
Must be something going on.
Like, uh-oh.
It's New Year.
Yeah.
Who knows? People have all sorts of fun stuff.
Well, I remember like being out running and gunning. I had no control over that feeling. I just reacted and like scratched and clawed to get my way. And I got it a lot of time. Maybe that was probably the bad thing, but it was usually detrimental when I did get my way. At least wasn't helpful to somebody else. So today there's more room for taking a second and thinking about what I'm saying or what I'm doing. And maybe 1 out of 10 times I don't lash out like I shouldn't. But
yeah, anyone who thinks they're a saint and doesn't have some sort of triggers or things that make them rise up out of their that's everyone has that stuff.
Yeah.
I still 100% guilty of being a complete asshat sometimes.
Yeah. I'm glad for a little bit bigger conscience that tells me, hey, you could have done better. And I kind of have a desire already too that I would have liked to have done better.
Right.
Just wasn't able that time. So that's all just tools I got from the program though. It's like every single thing I've gotten is from the program. It's a miracle because I was in there because of my shenanigans. So it's like, how do I deserve such a gift for that? But it's like God was always watching and waiting and just couldn't wait to present this to me. And, now it's still the same story every day. Like every morning when I wake up, he's still waiting to present his plan for me for that day. So the better in tune I am with that, like we've already chatted about in different ways, like the better it goes. And I'm glad for that too, because I've tried my way and my ways always end up miserable unless, I've figured out how to listen to the plan and follow it. So yeah, today I still fight it, but
that makes me think of the, how do you, if you want to hear God laugh, share him your plans.
Yeah.
And,
so that's what the coincidence is to me is God's plan. There's not really any coincidences. I heard today God has a plan and it's going to be fulfilled whether you help or not. So you could hope that you're going to help. I've heard that from Rick Rubin too, like maybe not in such a spiritual way.
Yeah.
But just more of like the creative being that comes to you. Like that's for somebody. And here it is, a chance for you to take that and make it into something. But if you don't take it and make it, then somebody else will, because that's the plan. So it's cool to be in touch with more of that stuff and kind of take the directions, and just it's rewarding to fall into that and have peace and contribute.
The spiritual path, if you're open to it, that the program provides is really where most of the power is. You declare yourself powerless, and if you're smart, you find some way of connecting to whatever is your higher power. And thankfully, I was reconnected to my Baha'i faith. And when you were saying that, like God's plan's going to work out one way or another, paraphrasing what you just said. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of it's a core prayer that was revealed by the Bab in Persian. That means the gate. Is there any remover of difficulties, save God? Say, praised be God, he is God. All are his servants, and all abide by his bidding. I like those last two phrases, the idea that even the people you're having difficulty with are the servants. Mm-hmm. And everything in the universe abides by his bidding. Mm-hmm. And it's such an interesting, if you're going through difficult times, it was actually the Bab that gave that prayer to his wife before he was exiled from her. And it was like, hey, please recite this going forward throughout your difficult times so that you understand this dynamic and how that space works and within, and it's such a profound thing. The more I contemplate it, the more meanings I get out of it. Just like every time I pick up the big book, I'll reread a passage that I've read, maybe 10, 20 times already. Yeah. It's like,
it's a living book.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, because you've continued to live. Your experiences are what are informing your understanding of those things, right? Your interpretations, the meanings for you. And of course, it's going to strike you different. Mm-hmm. It's a different day. You are a different you.
Yes.
That's the crazy metaphysics stuff, is when you get into the thoughts of, what is me? Is it just the thinking feeling? Is it just the genes and the physical side? Or like what is reality? All that kind of stuff becomes really, really heady when you start getting into it. And it may or may not help you on your every day-to-day journey, but I end up thinking about it nonetheless because I'm crazy like that.
Yeah. Perfect.
We're all crazy in some level.
You're perfectly crazy. You're made the way you were to do what you do. To receive the instructions you receive and do with them what was planned. Yeah. I have no doubt about that for all of us. Yeah. Some of this audio video stuff I had to realize like that was kind of given to me, like for whatever reason. But like to do stuff like this is just awesome. I get to learn and get to share other people's story. So as crazy as it is, there's times when I didn't think like, there was times when I thought maybe I should grow up and get rid of all that stuff and, go work like an adult.
Toys.
Yeah. But the plan, I just keep accumulating this stuff and keep setting it up somewhere. So, and it's been great to have somebody like you to come chat. I always learn something every time I listen to you. So it's been great.
Nice to hear.
Yeah.
I shared this with someone near and dear to me lately too, that half the battle, if not most of the battle, is just showing up, and that sounds simple. It sounds almost idiotic. But if you kind of maybe look back on situations where things didn't work out for you, did you actually show up? And when you think about that, even with further context, even though you physically might be there, were you mentally there? And I reflect back on my drinking career, and I think about how many accomplishments can I even attribute to myself when physically, mentally, emotionally, I was disabled in a lot of ways. I mean, that self-medication is a numbing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're not there. Right. And that's my biggest pride now is when I fuck up, me, sober, 100% me. And it's weird to think that you're proud about that, but you know what? Actually, I am, because I can actually own that 100% because I was there. You can't really own the stuff that you weren't there for.
Right. You can take the steps forward to correct it, or you'll remember it more clear, and maybe not repeat it. All that kind of stuff. Not blame somebody else, you blame yourself, which is great.
Yeah, taking ownership. Yeah. And actually, I've found a lot more peace in blaming myself, which is kind of a weird, fucked up way of thinking about things too, right? I mean, I've gained peace by the understanding that I can actually do something about it. Because that's really what it means to me, is that if it's my fault, cool. I know how to fix that.
Yeah.
If it's somebody else's fault, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because I can't do anything for them.
Right.
You know, it's just like anybody who walks through those doors to come to any program or any recovery thing, you know, they are truly the only person that's going to be able to do anything for them. You know, yeah, they need to show up. Yeah, they need to learn and read the book and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's them making those steps. It's them walking the path, and that doesn't happen unless they're willing. And I think willingness is a huge word that gets brought up in the book all the time.
Yeah. I think about some of the failed times I had in AA. I wasn't willing for it. This time around, I was so willing that it didn't matter what happened, I was going to make it through. I think until you're that willing, you don't get it.
Yeah, somewhere in the book it says wife, no wife, job, no job.
Yeah.
You know, none of those conditions really truly matter at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, and they probably shouldn't. But you still get that a lot. You still get that, and rightly so, maybe, right? That is a lot of people's anchor to reality and them feeling useful and good. And, you know, I'm bringing bread to the table. You know, I have a relationship with someone that I care about. You know, those things are definitely anchors for people, but they can also be the thing that causes them to go back out too.
Yeah. Yeah. My take on that is, since I'm already married, I already have a job. I work hard to make that work out. As far as I'm concerned, like, maybe I can change to make things work. If I can, I do. The job, it's a little bit more flexible. I mean, you're free to change jobs. What I've found is I ended up going around in a big circle, and guess what? Guess who the a-hole in the room was most of the time. But I find the strength to clean up my side of things through prayer. Like, I know this ain't working, and I feel like it could be me. I don't like the way I feel or the way I am acting. So I say a prayer right then and there. Please, God, help me to get this right, to do this better. That's the prayer. And then I'm just go on, and I might even forget I prayed, but it gets smoother. And then I can look back and go, cool, that actually was a little better. Like some of the days I've had at work, I've learned I have to pray every single morning before work to have any kind of good day at work. If I don't, it's just, I hate it. You know, I don't want to do it. But if I say that little prayer, just please help me through this, it just magically, in quotes, it's smoother, it's better. It's awesome.
Was that Sarah Silverman, one of her comedy specials was Jesus is Magic? I think she meant it facetiously, but actually, I'll take it. It's a funny phrase, but I think it speaks truths. I mean, it does seem like magic. I mean, everything, like, you know, thought experiment, you take all this that's in this room 600 years ago to the medieval times, you know, or however many 600 years ago. Yeah. And presented everything to them. They'd think you're a witch or, you know, an alien or
different planet. Yep.
You know, magic. You know, how does this watch thing work? You know, I mean, hell, even in our parents' generation, the Star Trek, you know, they do the little communicator thing.
Yeah.
That's what all of our phones are these days. I mean, they do the exact same thing that was sci-fi just 50 years ago.
Yeah, we have more computing power in our phone than the space shuttle that went to the moon. Yeah. All that good stuff.
I guess you could call it magic if you don't understand it.
Right. Yeah. It acts like magic does, but it's not an illusion, I guess. Maybe that's the difference.
Yeah.
You can actually look in and find a source to who's doing this stuff.
Because we understand it now.
Yep.
You know, through the science or whatever that revealed it for us.
I think you've talked about that being like the wind before. You can't see it, but you can definitely see the effects, and it's got the power to move some stuff.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and you can build yourself a sail and harness it and use it to your advantage for sure. My sail is a prayer, and then a thank you. I always remember to mention that part. When you look back and realize
Gratitude.
Thanks. I always pray please to God directly, for sure, God, and thank you also to him. I know that's where the source of strength and help has come from. I've not ever been shy about that, sharing it with you or any other meeting. I think sometimes people can give the credit to earthly things, but it's like you're talking about, every single thing is subject to God's power, was created by him. The universe is God's creation. That's how I understand it. So I no longer get mixed up in where that source of power comes from. It's the direct power from God that's above all other powers. That's how I see it.
Yeah. No, it's a great way of looking at it. And, but looking at it in the words you use can really distract people if they're not ready to hear the message.
Yeah. There's also an enemy trying to rob that message from you.
Yeah.
Or obscure it.
And, it's interesting. I've studied, Buddhism. I've studied the Baha'i faith that I'm part of nowadays. But there was also another interesting kind of New Agey book that came out called A Course in Miracles. And one of the basic concepts that they reveal is the idea that, love is the opposite of fear, just like light is the opposite of dark. But actually, there's only one true thing. There is only love. And actually, fear is just the absence of. And I think that's an interesting thought, too, that, you speak of the enemy and maybe you're speaking of the devil or something like that.
I am.
And I wonder how much of that isn't just human ignorance.
Yeah. There's some like, don't give the devil credit for what you caused to.
Exactly. It almost, because to me, it almost seems like if you gave the devil just as much as in like the opposite side of the coin, as much credit as God is the creator, you're almost giving them equal amounts of power.
Yeah, that's not true either.
And actually, in reality, there isn't anything truly as powerful as God ever.
Right.
So in a certain context, the devil is just the absence of God. And I truly think most of the evil that we encounter here in the earth is just human caused. Ignorance and fear and stupid thinking.
Well, there's
truly evil people out there for sure.
There's some of that in God's plan. There's got to be
a
negative factor to test the faithful ones and to make the plan go how it's supposed to go.
How would you appreciate the dawn without the night?
Yeah. I wouldn't.
There's no contrast. There's no separation from, there's no, if it was all just happy-go-lucky and there was no tests, no trials, no reason to show up, then how would you learn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to pick your battles. I'm glad we picked this one.
Pick the battle.
Yeah. Fight the dark so we can make it to the dawn.
I would never pick a battle. I'd always just run away. I was really good at the Irish goodbye.
Yeah. Just gone.
Where'd Mark go? He got too drunk. He went home.
Well, I guess what I should say more is you have God fight your battle. You just ask where you can show up in the line with the rest of the soldiers.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's how things go better for me. And I've noticeably seen you just grow and flourish along those lines. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's hard for you to see that yourself.
Right.
For sure. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
I usually only see how far I've come through other people's eyes, which is an amazing gift to have anybody share that kind of thing for you. So thank you for saying that kind of stuff, because
no worries.
It's the only way that I can actually truly, I can have my own ego stroke myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess
don't get much out of that though.
Along that subject, have you found anybody else to share the solution with?
Actually, my brother called me last week saying that he'd like to kind of, find the solution. And I'm cautious with that kind of stuff because family, I definitely can't be a sponsor. I definitely can't be somebody who's really sharing that for him. And I don't live in the same town with him either. I told him 100%, please pick up that phone and give me that call.
But I think you can help him. Like you could take him through the steps the same way you and I did.
Sure.
Just give him kind of an overview. And if he wants to admit anything at all or not, he'll at least hear the steps. Maybe he would be more likely to have somebody else take him. But I agree, doing it for family, it doesn't really work. I tried that with my dad.
Yeah.
We did just what I'm just saying. We went through all the same motions, but he couldn't tell me everything, and that's rightfully so.
Yeah.
So he didn't like see the miracle of what happens when you get to do that. So, but anyway, it could at least soften him up to accept the steps or whatever. I think as far as him picking up the phone, it might have to be you.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I need to get a lot better at reaching out.
I'm saying that from experience on my side.
I get complacent and realize that I'm probably not the best of a friend to anybody who's ever been a friend to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's another miracle. Like I've been really hands off with you, and it's partially because I'm kind of the same way. But another reason is I hope that you understand that all this miracle is coming from God, and I'm just simply the messenger. But
channel.
Yeah. Just me being able to be the messenger, though, and then watching you take it and grow, that's how I get to see how this program works and maybe understand somewhat how I've grown in other people's eyes. So that's why it's such a beautiful thing there. It's like, I guess, having kids. You don't know what your parents went through when you were a child, all the way until you have your own children.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. So, yeah. Just another place. Like I told you, I didn't respond the first couple times I was asked by God to take you through the steps. But I finally did answer, and I finally did it, and it worked. It doesn't work every time. There's been, I don't know, I've been through this seriously with half a dozen people, and I have one that actually got the message. But that's enough to see the beauty of how the program works.
Yeah, I have not been blessed with too many opportunities to even begin that conversation with too many different people. And that's fine. I'm not really looking for it either, but I'm sure that there will definitely be those opportunities the longer I stay in recovery. Just because, people hear about the fact that, oh, yeah, so-and-so's in the program, blah, 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 blah. And I've reconnected with a lot of old colleagues on the geology side of my career. And I still go to GSN meetings and all that kind of stuff, social gatherings where there is drinking happening for sure, right? And it's interesting when I do share any of that stuff with them. A lot of people are shocked, or were originally when I was first getting sober, and they're like, "Oh, really, Mark? We didn't know you had a problem." And I guess you can call that the high functioning alcoholic, right? The person that's able to hold down the job and
nobody ever told me that.
Get up every day and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, just because I'm not slurring my words doesn't mean I'm not wrecking my family. I mean, it's interesting, but everyone has their own kind of level of what's intolerable and what's okay. And I think complacency is a big part of that too.
Yeah. There's a lot of credit to just being like you are and telling whoever's around how you are. I mean, it still speaks and helps people. The message is the same. We all have problems, whether they're alcohol related or not, that we could use the same help for.
Yeah. How's the phrase go? You remove the alcohol from the alcoholic and you're just left with ick.
Yeah, sure enough.
Yeah. And that's usually why people go back out, right? Like, oh, wow, this is what my life's going to be going forward now?
Yeah.
Screw that.
Yeah.
And that's what I also went through a fair amount of kind of that righteous indignation my first year or two getting sober. I'd see a Bud Light commercial on TV while I'm watching the game or something like that, and I would get angry. Like, how are they allowed to put that on the TV? Well, then you have to get out of your own self and realize that not everybody's got the same problem that you have. It's my problem, not everyone else's problem.
Yeah.
But you get to that point where you're blaming the world again. And it's funny, even though you're not drinking and you're sober, you can still get intoxicated. by some other nasty things.
Yeah, for sure.
Such as your ego thinking that you're better than other people, or, oh, I must be a saint now. I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
Well,
I know the right way and nobody else is doing it. That's an intoxication.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah, I'm no stranger to that way of thinking. Yeah. Yeah, it used to bother me maybe the last time I got sober, how everybody else could drink and I couldn't. But this time around, I've had such a change. I don't have that feeling. I don't care to be around people that are partaking. I guess I have a hang up there, but it's keeping me out of harm maybe to just not hang out in that circle.
I can be at a social function. If there's a reason for me to be there, conversation is, whatever it is, I can be there for those situations. But I've shared this at meetings before in the past, that there's like a switch in the room or in people's brain that, after X amount of drinks at a certain point in the night, just everything changes. And I know I need to leave. Mm-hmm. No longer are the conversations actually constructive. Mm-hmm. No longer are people's attitudes or feelings actually conducive to, everyone actually being good to themselves. And something switches. And that's when I say, hey, it's been nice seeing everybody. I'm out of here.
Well, that's great.
And I definitely, there's no judgment. Mm-hmm. It's just at that point forward, there's nothing I'm going to gain from being here. And there's nothing more I can give either, I think, is another part of it too.
Another one of those situations where you have to see other people going through it to know what you were like.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
When you see some idiot being an idiot, like, oh, wow, I used to be there. Mm-hmm. That used to be me.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate. None of my circles are really into that. Because I have my mom and the aunt and family she lives with right now. They all do it, but they're not out of control. I mean,
right.
They're
normies.
Yeah.
And I think that was the aha moment for me when I was blaming the world for putting that Bud Light commercial on the TV. It's like, whoa. I think I heard somewhere along the lines of like 10% of the population actually have the addiction, the allergy, the alcoholism, whatever. And the rest of them are normies. Now, that being said, I definitely learned a lot from reading through the Russell Brand's Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions book, because he really frames it in a different way of the idea that just because you're not addicted to alcohol doesn't mean that there's not something else in your life that's fucking you up. Yeah. A 12-step program, a recovery program could help you in all sorts of different ways, depending on what might be the thing that's continually, and that's the key. Is there always something that you come back to, every 3-5 years, we're like, oh, wow, I've hit bottom again in some way or another. And I'd be hard pressed to think that only 10% of the population, or, is 90% of people out there just perfect people?
Yep. No, I don't know.
So I think
that's up to them, I suppose.
Yeah, pick your poison,
Yeah.
I've also heard in spiritual circles and teachings before that, we're here for a reason, not because we're perfect at all. And I think from Catholicism and Christianity, that's the idea of the original sin, the idea that there's something, wrong, and that's why you're separate from God and the universe, and separate from that perfect love and all that kind of stuff. And so then you start thinking, well, so that, and then it opens the doors for why you have tests and trials and things that are supposed to actually elevate you, and you're supposed to be able to transcend those things and become better by learning from. No one's born absolutely perfect. Well, actually, I don't know. Babies seem pretty damn perfect when they first come out, don't they?
Yeah. They still have a will and a nature that needs to be dealt with pretty immediately.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I kind of think of those as our baser instincts, our reptilian brain. There's those cravings and things that are hardwired into us just because biologically, yeah, we need to eat, you know, yeah, we need to reproduce, but then those drives, those functions become twisted and made weird.
Yeah, more
by-
conscious.
Yep. And, you know, as long as you can kind of understand the difference between a baser instinct and desire versus, you know, actually something that's a good use of your time and energy, then, you know, you might actually learn something there. But yeah, it's difficult to find that line for some people, especially if they never spent any amount of time doing any amount of self-reflection or knowing what's their thought versus just a random floating idea that's passing through their brain. I mean, meditation has taught me a lot in that regard too, just the monitoring and dispassionate observation of a thought. You don't always have to show up to that fight. You can just kind of observe it. You can just watch it. And guess what? 5 seconds later, it's going to be gone if you don't cling on to it. You don't try to make something of it that it's more than it actually is.
That sounds like why it's important to go to meetings as often as you can and listen to the right message as often as you can, because then when you go to reflect in those moments, you'll have an answer. Maybe you will have heard something to give you some clarity for how to be or not be in those spots.
It's weird too. I used to maybe not believe in coincidences, but I used to just, you know, think things were coincidences that were happening. But, you know, it's funny how things line up sometimes. When you're supposed to be getting a certain message, you'll end up getting it from several different sources. At a certain point, if you've been paying attention well enough, you're like, okay, I get it. I heard it now for the 5th time. But that's not a bad thing.
I've always been that kind of person. I've always had to hear it multiple times and see it for myself.
Yeah.
And I've slowed down a little. Maybe I've learned 1 or 2 lessons from somebody else. But yeah, failure's been a teacher for me, for sure. I guess I wouldn't want it any other way. I mean, that's how I was made, and I'm made that way for a reason, to, I guess, see things different. But just, again, thankful for the miracle that my failures led me to the correction, to the solution, to the help from God, and now the ability to share those episodes, hopefully help somebody else.
Yeah, I think counterintuitive is the way of thinking about those things. You know, someone who thinks they're successful might think there's only one path to getting to success. But and just like in the program, you know, how do I get the power to stop drinking? Well, it's actually by giving up all of the power you thought you ever had.
Yeah.
And that's counterintuitive, that idea that to get the power, I actually have to release. You know, the surrender actually gives me, you know, the opposite of it. And those, I mean, God, anyone who's studied any amount of spiritual paths and teachings, that's a pretty familiar paradigm. The idea that things that don't necessarily, those opposites tend to kind of interplay a lot when you're on the right path or you're trying to understand stuff.
I think that makes more room for I don't know how to say it, for like the people that really have more of the willingness for that to happen. They're even willing to go backwards from how they think. That's how willing they've become. So maybe that's some importance there. Sometimes it is counterintuitive. There's lots of examples in the world telling you got to take charge, you got to have control, you do everything. But especially for us, it is the opposite. I guess maybe that's how I've found some traction. I finally was willing to let go enough to hear the message, and I'm still learning how to let go every single day, lots of times a day.
Yeah, it's scary for sure.
Yeah.
I've also heard people describe it as the, you know, a road, you know, staying in addiction or whatever's messing you up is that straight path that you can see where it's going. It's that highway that's just You can see it on the map. You know exactly where you're going. But to make the better choice is to take that road where it's going around the bend in the forest, and you can't quite see where it's going. But that takes faith. That takes a surrender. That takes a letting go of your seemingly control to allow yourself to go down that path that you can't see where it's going. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people will stay on the straight path, the path that's predictable, the path that you can see where it's going, and that's their level of control. Hey, I've got some agency in what's going to happen to me, and that's because they're afraid. And I've been there too. I've been afraid of letting whatever modicum of control I thought I had in order to go down a path where I don't see where it's leading. And I think that's a higher power moment for sure, to kind of release and allow that process and that path to take shape.
Yeah, the path sounds like faith, like believing that God's the one that planned the path in love, and if you do follow it, you will find out. You'll be in the place that He's planned for you. Mm-hmm. You'll understand it's the best.
Well, and it's a true gift too. I mean, we're just after Christmas here. I mean, is a gift if you know what it was before it was given to you? I think that's a similar idea. That road that goes where you can't see where it goes. I mean, that's a gift, right? That's the faith of surrendering and allowing yourself to go through that process. It wouldn't be the same thing if you knew where it led, mm-hmm. if you knew what the gift was before it was given.
Yeah, it does make it more special.
That's a better surprise, that's for sure.
Yeah, just another thing you got to look back on the road and see, oh, God made those turns and made this part straight and whatever.
In my career, I nerd out a little bit, and I get maybe a little too giddy about going down a new road. It's one of my favorite things. I haven't been down that road before. One of my favorite things when I get to go out to like a new project or a new mountain somewhere, new geology to go look at and map and describe and put together, whatever, right? The fact that I get to go down a new road is one of my favorite things to do anymore, because I've been down so many of them. So it's fun when I get to go down new roads, and it's funny to think about that in the context of my spiritual journey too, that I was probably going down the same roads for so many years because I was afraid to go down those new roads. But now I literally make a living off of it.
That's cool. So what else do you got to share about your little business there? You had your story of how you come up with the name, and
I don't even know if I actually got into the entire story of the name. So I should probably flesh that out a little bit too. Arkenstone Exploration. So I mean, obviously I was going to call it something exploration because I've worked, production jobs. I've worked the exploration jobs. I've worked a lot of different things. I've been lucky to have been exposed to a lot of different stuff. Someone called me a generalist at one point, and I was like, okay, I'll take that title because I've done a lot of different stuff, right? And I'm definitely not necessarily a one act, really really deep in depth and knowledge in just exactly one category. And that's definitely one way that you take these sort of science jobs, is you can either become those generalists that can kind of do a little bit of everything, or jack of all trades type, or you end up getting really focused and really good at that one thing. Mm. And that's great too. I think maybe I was too distracted. But yeah, so I knew exploration was what I wanted to do when some other jobs and opportunities fell through. So I'm like, you know what? That's my favorite thing to go do. Go out, find the thing, follow up on, and it's funny to call it exploration because a lot of work is actually going back to old properties, old areas that might have seen some mining, might have seen some original diggings, prospecting, that kind of stuff. A lot of the stuff in Nevada dates back to the 1800s. I mean, that's when the first prospectors were out here. And so anyone who's in geology and exploration nowadays, I mean, we're standing on the shoulders of giants is the kind of phrase, right? I mean, it's still exploration. We still haven't found the mine. It's not ready, shovel ready for someone to come out there and actually dig it up. So you're still doing the exploration, but there's a lot of groundwork that's happened prior to that. And so that's humbling to go and get into those things. when I was thinking back to the topic, when I was thinking of a name, first book I ever read as a child that wasn't assigned to me at school, I picked up off the shelf out of interest on my own was The Hobbit, first book. So long history. I mean, this was like 7th grade. Long history of being a Tolkien nerd through and through. I was on blogs back in the day when they were filming the first Lord of the Rings movies and all that stuff. And so I was really invested in making sure they did a good job. And after I saw the first movie, I was like, oh, okay, I don't need to go to those blogs anymore. We've got this in the bag. And so Arkenstone is an extremely nerdy reference to The Hobbit. And I don't know if you remember in the movies, it's the stone that's above the king's throne, the dwarven king under the Lonely Mountain. And it made him go crazy, actually. So maybe there's kind of a negative connotation to Arkenstone, but it literally means the heart of the mountain, at least in context of the Tolkien mythos. It's the heart of a mountain. So it's this idea that there's some sort of power in the middle of a mountain that's like powering the mountain, which is kind of fun. And it's a gem that's just wealth beyond imagination sort of thing. It's worth more than everything else that's there. And so the idea of having kind of that be my, my the moniker, Arkenstone's Exploration, is the idea that, I'm looking for that immeasurable wealth in whatever I'm doing. And, the A and the E made for a good logo and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of nice. And it's fun because some people get it and some people don't. I'll hand them my business card and stuff like that. There's always, everyone who gets it always has a smile on their face. I'm like, yeah, you're a Tolkien nerd, aren't you? I'm like, yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, I saw the name. I didn't get the reference at first. I haven't followed any of that, but I figured there was probably a meaning. Yep. And then when I looked it up, I was like, oh, that's cool. That is perfect.
Yep. And actually, I think there's actually a connection back to the Bible too, because Arken is like the Ark of the Covenant. So it actually does kind of have a meaning, kind of as in like a box, a precious container of some sort. I don't do too many things in my life without some sort of forethought. If it's something good that I've done, I've usually thought about it. But so I'm coming up on a year running that company. My boss is a dick.
He's in the mirror.
And so for any boss that I've ever worked for in the past, I'm sorry. It's a hard job. But it's been very fulfilling. I've been able to maintain half a dozen clients, one in particular that's been kind of really the main role that I've, 75 to 90% of my time, depending on what's going on, has taken me back to Wyoming to work on uranium again. That's been 10, 15 years since I did any of that work. And that's been really fulfilling. But I've been able to maintain a certain level of projects and work here in Nevada too. I'm to the point in my life where I don't have to move for a job, which has been great. The idea that, I can just kind of bring the work to me and I can go to the work when it's important enough that I be on site to do the work. But navigating this whole thing has been a mystery to me, and it's divine providence for sure that I've been able to string 1 month to the next.
Yeah. Amen. That's beautiful.
Just the way, I've stopped questioning the journey at this point most days, and just kind of allowing the river to take me where it's going. I remember I definitely still have that imposter's syndrome thoughts and feelings every once in a while, like, is this actually where I should be? Like, do I have enough experience for doing this kind of thing? I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, I thought that it would be something I'd like to do when I'm mature and old enough to be a geologic consultant. I'd like to do that kind of work.
Well, welcome, you're there.
And in my brain, when it actually was like, well, let's go ahead and do that, I was like, whoa, this is like 10 years too soon. Like, come on, I need to go work in a mine longer. I need to go work for some sort of other company that's got me under their wing for a little bit longer. But I guess not.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I just I go out and I lick the rocks. Try not to lick the ones that are poisonous.
Yeah. You know the difference between how they taste. This one tastes like that. That one tastes like this.
I brought that from my underground experience because all the operations guys would just well, I'm sure they called me all sorts of things. But rock liquor was the derogatory term for geologist, right? So I just embraced it. Like, why not?
I have tasted something that dripped off of the back onto my coffee cup on accident, and it wasn't pleasant.
I'm sure it wasn't.
So, yeah, I might not be cut out for that kind of work.
I do kind of miss the underground.
Yeah.
Underground environment
cool.
is special. The space up at Jarrett Canyon was quite special because I didn't think that they needed to shotcrete everything. And so as a geologist, I could go back into old workings and besides the wire and mesh, there's the rock.
Nice.
They didn't shotcrete every damn inch of the mine. And so I could actually see the rocks. And, I view from, geologic operations from an underground mine perspective, that if you don't treat all of your drifts as the most expensive drill hole you've ever drilled in your entire life and log and collect all that data as much as you possibly can, you've made a drift for nothing. You really need all that data. And the best programs out there, the best geologic senior geos and different people running ore control programs and stuff like that, they know that. And they have their people down there collecting that data every day. But there's so much that's not captured. And so that was the wealth of knowledge that I was able to get into up at Jarrett and get down there and do the mapping for, was just all this stuff that had not been captured before. If someone had done the mapping before, who knows where it was, And now that everything's so digitally based, even if something was on paper from 30 years ago, well, how useful is that if I don't have it in that 3D space to look at and model with and use it for? And so that was amazing. That was a great time. So, and when he was talking about the back, I'm not sure if everyone understands what ribs and back and sill
probably
mean.
not.
But I wonder, I'm sure there's actual documented history of these terms, but when the first time I heard about the back and the ribs, especially the ribs, it's your biggest red flag of where these terms came from. I almost thought that the sill should be relabeled the belly.
Yeah.
Because they're literally describing like being inside of a serpent almost.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it's shaped like too.
Yeah.
It's always rounded on the spring line and
like a rib cage.
Yeah, like a rib cage. The back, the spine, whatever you want to call it. I just thought it was interesting. I'm wondering if that's not some sort of old school. That's what they called underground diggings in the medieval times or something like that.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to kind of track that down.
The face is the wrong way too. If the whole thing was a body, it's facing you instead of.
I don't know. The ass is the portal, right?
Yeah, must be.
all the faces are like the Hydra. You got all sorts of faces out there.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, so I guess to clarify, the back is the top of the tunnel. Right. The ribs are the side. Face is where they stop drilling and blasting.
Where you're facing.
Yep, true. Yep. Yeah, that's a cool world, though. I never really feared much being underground. It all seemed pretty legit to me. So just another place where I put my faith and confidence in God. Like if that's where I'm going to meet my end, I'm going to meet it. I've done all that I should do to not meet my end. And I mean, the rest is in his hands. So I've found God is underground too, as well as on the surface. I've met some that aren't so sure.
Oh, really?
They thought maybe you could find your way underground where God isn't. But I guess it's because I bring him in there with me.
That works.
He's definitely there too. We have all the Tommy Knocker stories and all that other kind of stuff. But
that stuff's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, we're sitting in a room in a building that's purportedly haunted.
Yes.
I mean, and I worked with a guy that worked in I didn't work at these mines, but he worked at the mines near Ouray, Colorado, that kind of north of Silverton area, that western Colorado silver, gold districts over there. And he had experiences where he saw cap lamps down stopes and headings that were cordoned off. There was no reason why anyone should have been back smelling cigar smoke in old school stope areas and stuff like that, where it's like, man, no one smokes underground anymore. Kind of fun to think about that stuff. And I kind of have a thought that nemaybe even some of that sort of activity is might even have a geologic scientific reason. I've never really tried to look at this one-to-one, but I mean, typically a mine is in a place where there's a high metal content, and that means high amount of gravity, high amount of magnetics. I mean, geologists actually explore for these things by actually measuring how much gravity, density, magnetics are coming out of the ground. And it's kind of makes me think and wonder, in all these old school ghost towns in Nevada and throughout the Western US, it makes me wonder, you see all those different ghost adventurers groups and people that go out there and film this stuff. It makes you wonder if it's not something to do with the geophysics itself that are kind of causing these phenomenon to kind of stay where they're at, and those echoes of time, or, who knows, maybe it's parallel dimensions, and, I'm here in 2024, but, that doesn't mean that the world that was in 1960s or 1860s isn't still here.
Yeah.
We're just living right next to each other. I don't know how much you studied like quantum physics and the idea of parallel dimensions in that.
Not much, but
regard. But time might just be the only thing that's really separating us.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy to think about too.
Well, even in a layman understanding, like all that stuff did happen in the same place before at a time. So some of the bits of what happened are definitely still stored there.
Why not?
Yeah. Maybe like the cigar smoke could have actually been trapped in the rocks. You know how pungent cigarette and cigar smoke is.
Yeah.
And maybe it got released just at the right time.
Who knows?
Yeah. I always like digging into that stuff and seeing if it can be solved scientifically.
And I've had my own experiences with what could only be described as paranormal, in my life. Recently, we went down and visited the town of Eureka on a weekend with the family. And there was a shop down there that we went into, kind of a little oddities, antique shop area. And, we bought some stuff and was talking with the proprietor there. And she actually took us to one of the back rooms to kind of see. I was actually where the Ghost Adventures had actually gone and filmed and investigated back there at one point too. And as I was leaving the area, we stopped at one spot to kind of look at, I think it was a stairwell. And it felt like vertigo, like the whole floor had just moved. Like someone moved the floorboard, and I was just kind of I had to take a step. There wasn't an earthquake. There wasn't any sort of thing that had gone on that was explainable, besides, I don't know, something had affected me where I actually got either dizzy or I got pushed or something. It was really hard to describe because it wasn't the sort of experience you go through normally,
right,
day to day.
Oh, I do. I'm dizzy all the time. No.
And I'm a pretty scientifically minded individual, and I'll try to debunk all day long. But it's at a certain point, it's like, well, that's just something I can't explain, and it's something that happened to me, and it's probably paranormal derived, And I felt that it was really cool that I had that experience, because how many people don't?
Yeah.
Maybe they watch
people that are looking for it and don't have it.
Yeah. I was like, what the?
Yeah.
It was weird.
I think I've resigned to feeling I don't know any of that stuff, and just I take it back to God has all the power. So if it's there, He let it be there or cause it to be there. And I'm just more like, yeah, if that needs to be there, that's there. Same with the haunted place that we're in. Like if there's ghosts here, then they're supposed to be here for some reason. You were talking, and I remembered like one time I just popped into my garage. My dad had recently passed away, and I had his motorcycle on a trailer that him and I spent so much time working on. in one of my garage bays. It was dark in there. I didn't have the lights on yet, but for a split second, I saw him standing over there by it. So, and like at that time, I was more closed-minded to that whole thing. Like, oh no, ghosts don't exist. That couldn't be him. But then I kind of had a conscience prick that, why not remember him like in a good way like that? Like that's what we did together a lot. That was how we had a relationship, had our good times and whatever. I was working on that machine. So why not allow for those things to happen if they're going to happen?
Yeah.
I think maybe you could have it whatever way you want. So yeah, I just chalk it up to the highest power in the whole universe first, and just say to myself, if I need to know the answer, I'll find it out. If I don't, I can understand it, that it's something God created and it's all good. It's all for some purpose. So that,
what do we actually
helps.
know anyway?
Yeah. It's like I said, I don't know. It's more of the direction I'm going with that.
Yep.
Just trying not to be so smart about everything. There is actually things I don't know, if you didn't know that.
I hope I'm one of the first people to tell you that I don't know.
Yeah.
I've definitely been prideful and egotistical about a lot of different things in my life, but whether or not I actually know or understand something has always been a gateway for me to knowing more and understanding more. And I'll be probably one of the first people to say, yeah, I don't know. But I'll help you find how to get that done.
Yeah.
I think people get caught up on like they're going to sound stupid or that they're going to like lose that respect or that job or something like that if they don't have the answer for everything. And even if something came out of your mouth, is that the answer? Is that the only answer?
No.
You almost close yourself off to the possibility of learning more if you think that you can just answer every question.
True. I have a bad habit or ability, whatever you want to call it, of figuring things out along the way. So I kind of have to learn how to put that aside and be like, well, I don't really know, do I? And I'm going to have to do some digging to actually find out.
Yep.
I'm getting a little better about speaking that way.
And that's an uncomfortable feeling too, that's that road again that you don't know where it's leading, right? You got to embark on those journeys every once in a while where you don't know where you're heading.
Well, thank goodness we're more willing to do that today. It's a great journey after all. It is a gift. All the surprises turn out better than I could have imagined, a lot of them.
Yeah, the idea of heedlessness, I think I'd heard that term before in connection with, drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. But in context, it means so much to not be heedless. I mean, to not heed things, not hear things, to not be observant of things and, and intoxicants and things that make you lesser, make you heedless, right? The heedlessness. And that, goes back to whether or not I can own, whether or not I've actually been there, showed up for something, been available for either my friends or family or coworkers and stuff like that. It's like, if I'm clear-headed and I'm not being a heedless person, I'm actually there and available to take those lessons. And I think that's the biggest problem of having been heedless in the past, is that I wasn't actually there to learn that lesson, to be the servant to everybody that I need to be. And I don't think I understood that term before actually going down that path.
Just already had the answer in your head and wasn't willing for any other answer.
Of course not.
Because it worked so well, for so long.
It's my plan.
Yeah.
doesn't even have to work well.
Yeah.
Just the fact that it was your plan will keep you trying to do that thing forever.
Yeah.
And that's shortchanging yourself, if I've ever heard it. Just the idea that, this is all there is all I'm ever going to learn.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's bleak.
Yeah. If you're not willing to continue to learn things. Yeah.
Well, thanks for not being that way.
Right. Oh, and the name of your podcast here, To Be Rad, right? I do when I was running the AA meetings when I was still running them, I'd like pick a word and I'd go online and figure out the etymology of it. And I was actually kind of taken aback by radical and to be rad, right? I was actually taken back by the definition of radical. I hadn't even thought about it. But I mean, an easy way to remember is radish. It means the root, to go to the root of something.
Wow, that's what radical is?
The original meaning. Obviously, there's the surfer version of it.
It seems backwards.
It kind of does, but then you think about it, in order to be extreme, you really do need to take something all the way to its end.
Wow.
And that's the root, right?
Yeah.
That's all the way down where it started.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Isn't that cool? And but I think that's true, though. In order to truly be radical, to stand out, to really be something amazing, you can't just take something for like that surface value of whatever you think it might originally mean. You kind of have to go down that root path to get to the ends of things.
Yeah, that's the coolest thing I've heard about that so far.
Yeah.
That name just came to me. Like I got a little miserable doing the same thing at work I always do. And I've always liked to fall back on audio and video stuff.
Right.
So I started making my own little videos. And just the name came to me. Be rad at something. That's what I should call this channel.
Perfect.
So I did. And then it's worked out well to go encourage people to do the same, like the be rad and be sad. I've said that enough that other people have heard it and they're like, I'm going to go be rad instead of be sad. It's really happened. It's really worked. It's pretty universal.
Yep.
I believe that everybody has that root thing that they can go dig and find and figure out that was the thing that was given to them to do.
Yep.
Everybody has a different one, and we all have a piece to the puzzle to make the whole giant puzzle. So that's no accident there. That is what this is all about, though. And it's a reminder message to me, since my name's in there, that I should be being rad at the things that mean that much to me, because they mean that much to you for a reason. Same with you, with your exploration and all that stuff. It's just, that is my underlying message for this whole channel, is to say that everybody has that thing and they just get miserable if they aren't working on it. And I think that's a guidance mechanism that comes from God. God knows what he made you to do. And so he's going to try to reward you for doing that and just give you all the things that just keep showing up so you are able to do that. And
yeah,
it's fun.
Man, it better be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not, I mean, even some shitty stuff can be fun. In retrospect, you kind of look back and go like, oh, wow, I survived that.
I figured out if you're working on the correct thing, even those terrible moments, you'll have all the strength you need to get through them. So it's like digging through the mountain. That's not probably fun, like literally, if you literally had to dig, but you're digging towards the heart of what's in the mountain.
I've actually seen some of those old school adits where if they had something to blast with, that was probably a luxury.
Yeah.
It's like, how did they haul out these tons and tons of rock by hand? Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're all rocks just big enough to fit in a hand. I've seen some piles of, I think, quartz maybe out of just, and then how do they get in and out of that hole that's there? Just a wooden ladder and climbing in and out? The one that I saw was kind of more of a shaft. It was not quite up and down, but close.
Usually they're following whatever geology, fault, seam, vein.
So that's how that started.
That almost dictates the geometry sometimes. Like down near Belmont, Nevada, we did a drilling project down there. I don't know. I said project in the Canadian way, project. I was hanging out with them too much. And it wasn't a decline and it wasn't a shaft, but it was like 30 degrees. Nothing you'd want to hike or do on your own. And I'm just like, but the reason why they went that direction is because that's the direction the rocks go.
Yeah, that makes the most sense.
It's just, and I'm looking at these adits, these decline shafts, whatever you want to call them, going down into the earth, and I can't see the end of it, and I'm not stupid enough to go underneath that unsupported ground. But I'm just like, how how did these people do that? I mean, that stuff all started in the 1860s. It was mothballed by the 1880s, long before any sort of mechanized mining was a regular thing. I mean, they might have had like a pulley system with maybe like a donkey or a mule at the surface, hauling skips up or something like that. But
yeah, they could easily.
It would have been very rudimentary.
Yeah.
And there's these, numerous different diggings down in that Belmont area in particular. All the state regulation, all the state records that I've actually seen from that area estimate anywhere from 1.5 to 5 million ounces of silver were produced out of that area. And I think some of my kind of back of the napkin calculations were like they must have been hauling upwards of 50 tons of rock on any given day out of the ground. And to think, 50 tons, hell, there's these huge haul trucks out at the open pits these days. They're 400-ton haul trucks, right? But to do 50 tons by hand, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, what's an underground haul truck? Is that maybe more like 30 tons?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's quite a bit of stuff.
So it'd be like it's just 2 haul trucks from the underground these days. But to do that by hand or even, hand carts, I mean, I didn't see any rail out there. They didn't have any rail out at Belmont, and it was too steep for them to do rail anyway. But
it seemed like a head frame kind of mechanism at the one that I saw.
There is one head frame in one area of Belmont down there, but it's even collapsed and fallen down and stuff like that. And I think that's from a different era of mining too. I mean, that was like I-beams was that one. So that wouldn't have been anything to do with the 1800s.
No. The one I saw was wood and like they just
still
slapped
standing?
it together. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Not like complete.
Those are fun to see.
Yeah.
Whenever any of those structures are still standing, it's just kind of an amazing thing for me.
Yeah.
Go out and look at.
Just the question that comes to mind when I saw that is how. Even looking at that, like just how.
Yeah, we're so reliant on the technology that we have at our disposal today that we kind of forget that people have done this stuff with really basic means long before we ever came around.
So those people obviously were doing what they were programmed to do, because that's why they kept doing it. Maybe some were doing it for the wrong reason, just to get rich, just gold fever.
Yeah.
But whichever way it was, they had all the resources they needed to do it.
Yep.
Yeah. So now we do it metaphorically. We mine to get the gold, whatever situation we're in. Like the biblical spiritual things are mentioned that way a lot of times. There's a lot of ore just to get an ounce of gold, like hundreds of tons. What is it? What's like the amount of say gold in a ton of ore, like ounces per ton or
typical
whatever.
grade these days? 0.1.
Yeah.
I mean,
0.1 ounce per 2,000 pounds of rocks.
Ounce per ton is the unit of measure there.
And all the work that goes into getting that out of the ground, it's still worth it to get that tiny little bit of gold.
I think on some of the heap leaches, if they're doing open pit heap leach, especially if it's oxide and it's not tied up and they can just throw cyanide on it, I think they can go down to about 0.04 these days. That's pretty low grade.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really low grade if you think about it. I mean, especially all this Carlin type stuff. I mean, we don't see the gold until it's being poured.
Sub-microscopic.
Yep. Bound into every other molecule that you can't see. Yeah, I mean, I think the only vein type, visible gold, the Fire Creek that Klondike's and now Hecla owns, but that's mothballed these days. There's a couple of them throughout the state where you'll actually see some visible gold, but anyone that's mining any large tonnages these days are all microscopic gold stuff. And I mean, that's why the old prospectors walked over it, saw all the stuff that, hey, this might be something interesting, but, it didn't assay well and they couldn't see the gold, so they just kept on moving, most of them. There's some placers over by like, Rye Patch and, over towards like the Highcroft areas and stuff like that.
I think Cortez got some more placer stuff, or maybe not anymore.
There's placers everywhere. It's just the placer is such a erratic deposit type. because of its very nature. I mean, placer is something that's gold that has eroded from its original lode or source material and is in the alluvium, and so how it got there is, anyone's guess, but you have to kind of really understand how rivers, streams, and alluvial fans work, and that's like herding cats at best. And so it's a very difficult thing to do economically. And that show Gold Rush up in Alaska and stuff like that, that's what they're mining. They're not mining any actual low vein deposits.
We'd have to have the processing things like we see.
That too.
Yeah, I see on a daily basis
too. Yeah, and that level of technology, all of the haul trucks and the metallurgy, those are the true alchemists these days, or metallurgists, are able to take something that, gold's locked up in the sulfides usually out here if it's not an oxide ore. And so you have to break that bond somehow. So if you've ever seen an autoclave or a roaster, they're breaking one of those two bonds, carbon or sulfur, and it's a big to-do to get it done. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of, chemistry too, and putting all the things in the right context, and they still don't catch everything.
Yeah. Sand and gravel and accidental gold recovery.
Well, yeah, I visited some of those ones talking about down in the Colorado area, around Silverton, the Animas district up there. There's still some old school mills that are still like there. And there was one I went and saw. It was, the name of the mill is just funny. It was called the Sound Democrat. It was the name of the mill. And at the end of the mill building, where all of your stuff would be coming out past the stamps and everything like that, was just this riffle table. And I mean, that's, you have water going one way and all of your gold bearing material going the opposite direction. And it's just gravity. It's just a density thing that actually makes the gold end up on one side of the table or the other. And, sluice boxes, all those different ways of kind of just using basic physics to your advantage is a lot of ways that any sort of placer mining and that sort of mining works, at the end of the day. And I mean, it's just funny because that's not, I mean, there's definitely mills that still operate that way if you actually have that sort of deposit, but I've never worked for any of them. And I would be hard pressed to find anyone probably in the U.S. that actually has worked at any sort of mill that has that. Maybe some of them have that kind of stuff on one side of the process facility or the others, but I don't think.
Yeah, I'm definitely just right in the middle of the process, so I just understand how the machine works.
Right. Maybe
not to and from that machine. I don't necessarily have to know the to and from. I just have to know how that machine works. So yeah. I never see anything that even closely resembles gold. My paycheck, I guess.
Right.
It's as close as I get. Other than that, it's mud or dust. And that's that. I've never held a gold bar or doré or anything like that.
Right. I mean, neither. Never been not allowed to do any of those sort of tours.
Right.
Must not have cleared the background check.
Yeah. Well, maybe I should try now. I might actually clear it.
Well, I've never even been asked to ask about that.
Yeah.
I've never even thought to ask about that kind of thing.
I've had to go into a refinery though, but same thing. Just like this machine's not doing that, so I go in and make it work like it's supposed to and get out of there.
Yep.
They do the whole search you and give you different, like a white suit to wear and make you take all your stuff out of your pockets. And
yeah, I've definitely never been that far in.
Yeah, but it's just the nature of the machinery, the process. That's fine.
Yeah.
The other part is interesting and fascinating. And nowadays, like considering like the dollar being more worthless all the time, gold gets more interesting. It's kind of cool to look at coins and just understand that that's still something of value. So,
well, in this recent push towards critical minerals globally, not even just in the U.S., but globally, the idea that we need to go find this, and every country has a different set of a different version of the critical minerals list. But I mean, they're really they they speak to the importance of mining, the importance of continuing to extract our resources from, areas that, and sources that. How do you build a Tesla? How do you build anything these days, an iPhone, without minerals?
Mm-hmm.
You just don't. I've got a bumper sticker on my truck that says, if it's not grown, it's mined.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's the state motto, isn't it?
It should be. I even got to go over to Saudi Arabia last year, and it was coming up on almost exactly a year ago that I did that, because the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where we get, I don't know what percentage of our gasoline, or at least the crude oil that becomes our gasoline, even they are like, oh yeah, we should probably start thinking about, what's next. How do we mine or get resources for something that's not the current system? They could continue to just do what they do and make billions and billions and trillions of dollars. Or they could be smart and go like, oh yeah, we should probably invest in finding copper and gold and, God forbid, finding some uranium to
Not them.
replace coal-fired power plants. But yeah, and it's interesting if we ever get out of our own way and actually allow for those things, those resources to be mined, we might actually be, a human species that spends more time and effort on that than our defense budget. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Just how it's going. It's according to plan.
That's not going to happen anytime soon, though.
No. Yeah. Good time to get your affairs in order and keep them that
That's
way.
always been the case, though. I think you go back throughout history, and it's always the end times in some regard. Everyone's always, doom saying some sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's always interesting times.
Well, the way I look at that too is like it could be the end for any of us at any moment. So it doesn't hurt anything to be prepared for it, whether it's going to come like Armageddon or just your life is gone.
Yep.
It's good to be prepared, and it's more rewarding to live along those lines while we're alive. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
There's a phrase in the Bible, or it's derived from that, and probably other sources as well. The idea of the thief in the night, right?
Yeah.
You never know when your appointed time might come. It'll come like a thief in the night, and that's the wisdom to go back to the AA and recovery kind of topics. Is the idea of that 10th step, staying connected, doing your inventory daily to make sure you're not putting your head on the pillow with some resentments and some I'm sorries. Keeping your side of the street clean is huge, and that comes directly from that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
It all comes back to the source.
If it should, if
Yeah.
you're paying attention.
Yeah, I like following it there. It helps me to get along in this big world. I recognize this as not being the true home. True home is in heaven. And just trying to make sure my ticket is secure. Actually, the way I believe it is, it's already been paid and bought. I can still lose out, but as far as that goes, I'm free to learn how to be a better human. I'm not counted out automatically because I'm not perfect, but it's been bought and paid. It's just up for me to do good and share the message, help everybody else keep their ticket in their seat or find it. So the rest is fun and entertaining. It's good to have someone like you along on the journey.
Sure.
Get some help from you and be able to help you sometimes. Just all part of the beauty of it all.
All of the above. Yeah, it's like whenever I show up to a meeting, I saw you maybe the first couple of times. So you'd open up the back of your book and you jot down something that maybe someone said or something like that. And I was like, oh, yeah. I should probably write this stuff down because my memories, And that's why I remembered the phrase someone shared a couple of weeks back. You don't always have to show up to every fight you're invited to. And I just was like, oh, that's perfect. opened up the back of the book and wrote that down because it's like, I got to remember this one for later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about that, just like showing up to the meeting and being present, whether or not they say something profound, the idea that they'll get something, some tool that they add to their toolkit for day-to-day life comes from those sort of interactions, that connection to those, someone else has gone through it. Someone else has put it into those words for you. And that's a gift in and of itself.
I've had time and again the experience going to AA or church, either one. I'll have had a thought or a question or an experience that I went through already. And when I show up to the meeting, the answer comes out of someone else's mouth. I didn't tell them. I didn't ask them. So that's the part about showing up and the answer message is there for me.
Yep.
Just great. That's happened enough times for me to understand that that's coming from God's mouth through theirs. So being there, showing up, suit up, show up, and throw up. One of those sayings that you write down. That's what that is to me. I usually mean well when I speak, but I'm not very great at it. I'm bad at English, but
Words
I do
and stuff.
show up. I know how to show up. I know how to open my mouth and at least say enough words that probably the right thing come out. I've also seen other people struggle to share what they're thinking, and I feel like there's a spiritual connection between them and me that makes up the difference of what they are saying or what they're trying to say.
For sure.
So, and that's just the magical things, spiritual things that go on. Just that's my experience. That's how I understand God. But definitely got to put oneself in those positions, those experiences to experience all that. That's not as hard as it used to be. I don't always want to go to a meeting, but have you ever been sad going to a meeting or feel like you've missed out?
That's a really good question. No. I mean, I can't think of a time when I've showed up to an AA meeting and I'm like, well, fuck, I got to go through this thing again. No. In fact, when I used to open up and make the coffee before everyone else showed up, I absolutely adored that time because I knew I was there for a purpose greater than myself. Having the door open, having the coffee ready for when that first person shows up. That was a gift in and of itself. And I'm happy that someone else is doing it these days with the group that, that we go to here in town. But I kind of miss that a little bit, It's good that I don't, because I do end up on the road and out of town a lot these days. It's probably good that I'm not always having to kind of pawn that off on somebody else. But I missed that a little bit. That was a good part of my week.
Yeah, our meeting's solid. I've been to other meetings, maybe even ours sometimes, where I could have been a little bit mad or something about whatever was going on, but just thinking about it right now, it's still a benefit because it meant something was going on wrong in myself.
I'm sure I brought baggage into a meeting numerous times, but
that'd be a good thing to call it.
The being there itself is always in my brain, or at least in my recollection, has always been a good thing.
I finally have a fear of not going.
Oh.
Like when I'm able.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. Yeah. I don't ever feel like I've got this enough that I need to quit going. Matter of fact, I've tried that before, and that's when I failed. This time I have not quit going to meetings, and I haven't failed. So,
I listened to a lot of people who have that share the story of relapse, and I count myself among the people that haven't had to share that story yet. I hope that never changes, because man, I don't know if I'll ever survive. Like one of the phrases we hear from one of our regular attendees is it's easier to stay sober than to get sober.
Mm-hmm.
And God, I hope I never have to test that theory out.
It'd be miserable, I think, even more, because people say I'd probably die out there, but I think the worst thing would be is you wouldn't die.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that would be the easy way out, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Like you would just suffer for a long time. You'd die eventually, but It'd be probably a long, painful, drawn-out thing.
Pretty much guaranteed it would be.
It was long and painful and drawn out the first go-around. Like, I didn't die when I was out there already.
Well, and, I think of myself as someone who hasn't relapsed, but I have. I mean, let's be honest about this kind of stuff. Just because I've been in this program for the past 4 years and have strung together these number of days, and definitely plan on continuing that going forward, doesn't mean that the 20 years prior to that wasn't a whole string of ups and downs and relapses and, reforms that, I'm never going to drink again during that one hangover that was really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, just because I didn't show up to an AA meeting doesn't mean that I wasn't being stupid and, doing that stuff. So I think it's kind of interesting looking at that stuff, thinking back.
I think it's good also to recognize the relapses that happen each day in different categories. Definitely had those relapses and short tempers or not holding my tongue when I should have or not apologizing soon enough.
Yeah.
That's kind of been a gift to me too, to realize I know I screwed up in my thinking. I mean, in my opinion, I screwed up. So it's a gift to be able to go say, hey, I'm sorry. I know I screwed up. I mean, that does wonders for me, and it helps whoever I screwed up in front of. Whether they practice that same thing or not is okay. But for me, it's been indispensable. Like, I don't ever want to go like into the next day having not apologized for that relapse of character. Just another level of freedom I've come to love and know. Just as a result of all this. Yep, all planned in love, all a gift. Yeah, man.
Good stuff.
Well, you got anything else you want to plug while you're on here? You want to tell people how to get a hold of you for some geo experience and help?
www.mineralexplorationgeology.com. I was amazed that domain was even available. It's a long one. It's 3 words strung together, but mineralexplorationgeology.com is my website, which needs a lot of work actually. But I guess if someone out there is listening to this actually wants some exploration geology help, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to kind of kept the Rolodex of a lot of good people to know, and so someone or something out there was steering me in the right direction when I was continually being involved in different social groups and professional groups that kind of kept me connected with that community. Because I mean, you can't go on to LinkedIn or anything and just recreate that from scratch.
Yeah.
That takes the years of actually building those relationships, and not, even during my stupidity of being an alcoholic and all that, at least still showing up most enough days to keep a good reputation on my shoulders is a gift for sure. I mean, I definitely could have burned a lot more bridges than I have. And I definitely wouldn't be able to do the things I'm doing now and building the career that I have now if I hadn't at least done some things right. In my, I think it's almost 18 years now since I've been out of college doing this stuff. And it's funny because, I mean, this year's work with the uranium work is, I mean, that was 10, 15 years in the making, because, I mean, that was the last time the uranium price was up where it's at right now. And so, I came out here and got into the gold work when that was starting to dwindle. It was like, 2013. That was 11 years ago when that last uranium cycle was kind of dying off. And that was right after Fukushima. I don't know, probably some people remember that tsunami and earthquake off the coast of Japan. and then the nuclear power plant that lost its power and partial meltdown and all that kind of stuff. That's what really killed the uranium price last go around. But the reason why it's coming back up again is because it's still needed. The only way that we're going to get off of carbon sources of energy is to actually use the wonderful gift that is nuclear power. And I truly see it that way. It might have been born of, the big mushroom cloud and killing lots and lots of people, and the threat of killing lots and lots of people. It's still to this day, but especially during the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia and USSR and all that stuff. That's definitely its legacy in one facet, but the reality of it is it's a perfectly good source of energy that burns clean and is 1,000,000 to 1. I've shared this before. I had the opportunity to actually do a presentation at a conference and then a couple of GSN meetings this last year, but 1,000,000 to 1 is your scalable factor here. For every 1 gram, ounce, whatever unit of measure you're talking about of uranium that's going into a reactor, it takes 1,000,000 carbon grams, ounces, whatever, to equivalent that one of nuclear energy. And so that math's not going to get any easier anytime soon. When it takes 1,000,000 of something, when you can just get by with 1, you're probably just going to go do that. It's so much. It's a matter of energy density at that point. And, people then go and say, hey, they got these, big nuclear power plants and, hey, have you ever heard of Chernobyl? I'm like, yeah, I've heard of Chernobyl. And I've actually seen the show on HBO. And actually they did a very good job of showing exactly how that happened. But once you actually have a reactor up and running and humming along, it is the cheapest source of power we've ever built.
Wow.
As a human species.
They should be all over it. There's a giant window of profit in there.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine? I mean, inflation wouldn't be near as bad of an impact on the economy if your energy sources stayed cheap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of your biggest initial costs to do any business is your utilities, your overhead, your capital costs that come up front and center in a lot of those things. And if that didn't cost as much as it did, everyone would be making more profit, But it really does take more than just, your local businessman or even your local politician to get those things to work. It really does take that government level of, call it a subsidy, but actual like research and development and permitting and approval, all those different steps that go into making these things a reality. It takes that level of green light to be able to make these things happen. And man, that is so hard to find any consensus these days among anybody in the political spheres.
Yeah, they're just looking in a different direction.
Let alone multiple nations all getting on board with the same idea. So
yeah, it's too bad. But
it's a challenge.
At least somebody's trying to do something in that direction right now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's happening.
Yeah. I was asking you on your LinkedIn where I can get some uranium and plans to build a power plant for myself. Yeah, do you think that would ever be a thing?
I can go show you where some of the uranium is in situ, in the ground. No. That should never be allowed. Someone, a regular civilian, should never be allowed to do any of that stuff yourself.
I'm not regular.
However, there's an interesting technology out these days that could definitely upscale, or maybe there'd be an overlap someday between the big megawatt reactors and a watch battery. There's actually that new material called graphene, which is just a really thin sheet layer of carbon. They've put a radioactive isotope on the other side, on both sides of the graphene, and it actually creates a charge. Actually creates volts. on something as small as a watch battery.
Nice.
And the thing is, there's no need to recharge the thing. I mean, the raw innate radioactivity is what's causing the charge. And nuclear physics, these things have half-lives. And I think I remember the technology that they were building had an estimate of the fact that battery could run for thousands of years.
Wow.
Just by like 1,000 year or
just
more.
What we need.
But and the cynical side of my brain is, oh, that'd be really cool, but I know exactly why they're not going to build it, because how are you going to get a return customer?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's where capitalism kind of breaks down, I think, is the idea that, you have to. I mean, that's why people put planned obsolescence in products these days. Mm-hmm. They plan for them to break, and that's such an old world way of thinking about stuff. And if we could get behind the newer tech that could give us something that would last beyond our children and their children and their children.
Yeah, just think what that would lead to that they could make money on.
Well, yeah, and that's the short-sightedness is to think that they might not build it because they wouldn't get a customer again. Well, but come on, though. That's an amazing technology.
Yeah.
Do you want Star Trek?
Yeah.
This is how we get Star Trek, or we could just continue to rub our sticks together like cavemen. And, my view on all carbon sources of power, politics aside, is it's the technological equivalent of a campfire.
Yeah.
Still today. I mean, we found really, really cool ways of harnessing that campfire. I mean, my vehicle has really sophisticated campfires running that piece of equipment, but it's still carbon combustion. That's all it is. We haven't gone past that. And nuclear energy is the first opportunity we've had as a species to break out of that, to literally that 1 million to 1, scalability of energy density. It's a complete game changer. We're not talking about carbon combustion anymore. We're talking about something completely different.
Yeah. What are the odds of somebody secretly doing that on their own?
Oh, there's been people gotten in trouble doing that.
Yeah.
No, there's been.
You just don't tell anybody if you are.
Was it a guy back in Ohio or something like that? There was a younger guy who had actually tried to build his own reactor. I'm just like, have you gone to school enough to actually, A, do the thing that's a really complex thing to do, and B, the safety protocols that go into actually making sure that you don't do something stupid and kill yourself. There was a guy in Japan that was mixing a batch of, they were essentially making the fuel assembly rods that go into nuclear power reactors. And he was using it was really high concentrations of uranium, and he was mixing it in a slurry. And I'm misremembering some of the exact details here, but he actually, the material went critical while he was mixing it. And the amount of dose that he received during that time was, tens of thousands of chest X-rays, worth of gamma radiation, probably some neutron radiation too, and stuff like that. And he suffered the same fate that those people in the HBO Chernobyl, well, the actual Chernobyl accident, that their bodies liquefied over time.
Wow.
Like eventually the veins couldn't pump blood to the tissues because the veins weren't there anymore. And the morphine that they were trying to give them to cut the pain couldn't go where it needed to go because, we're talking about the difference between radiation being radio waves, electromagnetic radiation is, that's just physics. That happens all the time. But when people talk about radioactivity in the context of nuclear power and atomic bombs and all that kind of stuff, we're talking about something that's called ionizing radiation, or deionizing radiation. The idea that, and a real simple concept here is a water molecule is exposed to radiation, it deionizes. It ionizes, meaning like the H2 and O separate from each other. Well, you would like them to go back together as H2NO again, but maybe they reassemble as H2O2. Well, that's not good for your body, right? And so that's what's happening on the molecular level when you're exposed to high doses of ionizing radiation. Is all of those molecules have been unmoleculed.
Wow.
And so it's a really basic chaos of chemistry that's going on in your body and your tissues, and that dose is deadly if it's too high. That's why a chest X-ray is fine, because it's a very small amount. There's something that's collecting that image on the other side of that exposure. Really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. But at high enough doses, just like those people at Chernobyl were exposed to, the body cannot reassemble itself.
Wow.
And maybe at some point, if we get really good at being able to fix that kind of thing, we can, like Star Trek, we can reassemble the molecules in the correct way. But right
prevent
now,
them from ionizing.
We can't. Our bodies can't. We're not that good at reassembling, at healing ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's real rudimentary understanding of what high levels of radiation means to the physical body.
Wow. I can't help but think, like, if we were going to go down that road, we could figure it out, though.
Oh, no.
Whatever needed to be done.
The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
Pandora's box has been opened.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think it's really a choice anymore. This is a technology that will be used. It's just whether or not we're going to get out of our own way in time to learn from the mistakes and to double down on let's do it. The sooner we start doing that, the better. But if we continue to belabor the point and ask the question whether or not, I mean, that's not a debatable thing for me anymore. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But
today we're going for it.
I would hope so.
You're going for it. You're trying to help these people find out where it is so they can try to go for it at least.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great.
Yeah. It's out there. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It's in the seawater.
Oh, yeah?
Did you know that?
No.
It's about 5 parts per million in the seawater. Something like that. Terrestrially, it's about 2 to 3 parts per million in just your average continental rock. Higher in granites and stuff like that. But the reason why it's so high in the seawater is everything that's ever eroded off of the continents have gone down into the sea.
Oh, yeah.
And it's still there. And that's why saltwater is so many dissolved materials in the water, right? And the Japanese, again, they were looking at ways of harvesting uranium from the seawater, actually using shrimp shells, because the little chitin material that the shrimp shells are made out of have little tiny holes in them, just like the carbon and leach columns out at gold recovery systems have. I mean, it's a sponge for it, essentially, is what it is. And they were making, I think they originally made like a resin bead-based net, but that was too expensive. So they were looking for a cheaper way of getting a similar material, and they actually settled on shrimp shells.
Wow.
And so they'd make these big nets out of shrimp shells, and they'd go out and just dredge the waters literally with a boat. And then they would collect the uranium that actually found its way onto the shrimp shell.
That's cool.
Problem is that's still too costly of a method to recover for what the price is right now.
But it's a prototype to be refined.
But if just like anything, as the commodity gets more and more expensive, certain things become more and more available. I mean, if gold wasn't $2,000 an ounce right now, we wouldn't be mining any of this stuff out.
Right.
Wouldn't be profitable enough to do it.
Yeah, we've seen it at $250 an ounce, and it was chaos.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, price to produce is all a function of what the actual commodity's price is itself. And grade, what's a mineable grade is just a function of price. Price, to produce, price that you get once it's actually in the bag. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm thankful for all these people that are being rad at figuring all that out. I bet you just can't stop them. It's just an itch they have. They go for it. They do it. You and I are no different.
Mm-mm.
Just the best we can do is recognize what it is and accept it and go for it.
Yep. True calling or a vocation is just something that you're compelled to do, right?
Yeah. No matter what.
Yep. That's the easy stuff to show up for.
Heck yeah, man. Well, this has been easy to show up for here today.
Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. I've had a great time. I always have a great time chatting with you. We got to do it more.
Yeah. And hey, we might even pick a topic next time.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah.
But not necessarily.
I appreciate you, man.
Of course.
Congratulations on almost 4 years.
Yeah.
About time you might think about working the program now.
I want to open that book I gave you.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Looks good on you, though, buddy.
Thanks.
I'm glad to see where you're taking it, and just glad that, like, I don't mistake that it's me helping you today so much, but that you've latched on to a God that you understand, and you've let him take the reins, which I think is what everybody should do. I appreciate that, man.
Yep.
I love you too, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks, Brad.
So keep on doing good, buddy.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers, no fears. Be Brad got his start by like building a following by playing games, streaming online, and then just like chatting to it while he's playing. They've got a pure podcast. There's no video. It's just them, and it's him and two of his other buddies, and they pick a topic, but it's like,
like maybe stick to it, maybe
they
not.
might stick to that topic.
Yeah.